Lowestoft is one hell of a town. It is home to one of the most breathtaking beaches in the United Kingdom and is known for being England's most easterly location. But far more fascinates me about this town than just its placement. Lowestoft once boasted an enormous fishing industry and was a very active port town not so long ago. Some of you may even have fond memories of visiting this town to see the air show or to have an unforgettable family outing on the beach.
Welcome to the 2012 Lowestoft Seafront Air Festival.
I love this town with a passion and would take great pleasure in showing you some of the most historically significant points of interest, stories and other oddities in and around Lowestoft. This is Lowestoft, one hell of a town. The historical finds of Pakefield Cliffs. To start this off, I'm going to take you to Pakefield. Pakefield is a suburb of Lowestoft and has an extremely high historical value, yielding some of the most important discoveries in the history of the United Kingdom. Debatably the most important of these discoveries occurred when on one fateful day in 2001, two legendary fossil hunters came across a man-made flint object during an excavation of Pakefield Cliffs, following an extremely high surge. This flint object turned out to be the earliest evidence of human existence in the entirety of Northern Europe, a 700,000-year-old man-made flint tool. Previously, we only had evidence of human existence from 500,000 years ago, a flint axe made by an early ancestor of the Neanderthal. In addition to this discovery, remains of ancient animals also dating to around 700,000 years old have been found during excavations of Pakefield Cliffs. These findings included saber-toothed cats, extremely large deers, and even elephants. These aren't the only important finds that Pakefield Cliffs has yielded. After every high surge, hundreds of uncommon and rare coins dating from Roman to Victorian are found at the base of the cliffs. Even I myself have found several interesting artefacts from this area, including a Roman coin, a medieval matrix seal, and what appears to be an ancient strap end. If you are ever in the area after a heavy storm or a high surge, it might be in your best interest to grab your metal detector and search the beach below the cliffs. You seriously never know what you may find. With this being said, please hunt safely. Never dig out the cliffs or attempt to climb them. To wrap this segment up, I would like to share with you a bone of my own discovery. It is what I believe to be a tibia bone belonging to a large cervid, possibly even that of an Irish elk. I found this bone on Pakefield Beach following an extremely high tide. I wonder how old this bone is and what exactly caused this creature to die. Whilst we're on the subject of Pakefield, I also discovered this piece of coprolite, otherwise known as fossilised feces. Finding this coprolite isn't uncommon. In fact, during the 19th century it was mined heavily in Suffolk as a great fertiliser for crops. In conclusion, Pakefield Cliffs has and will continue to yield some of the most amazing and important discoveries not only in Suffolk, but in the whole of the United Kingdom. The Witches of Lowestoft. Rose Hicks was a woman trialled of being a witch in Bury St Edmunds during the 17th century. Although not originally from Lowestoft, she had moved here and got married in 1625 to a man named William Cullender. She would take his last name, becoming Rose Cullender. The two would go on to have 9 children over the course of 13 years, 5 of which would sadly die before reaching the age of 10. Rose and William initially lived on Duke's Head Street, formerly known as Old Blue Anchor Lane in Lowestoft. They stayed here until 1638 when a man named Richard Price had agreed to mortgage his house situated in Swan Lane to Rose's husband William. It took them 3 years to pay for the house, officially making it their home in 1641. Sadly, within a year of owning the house, William Cullender had passed. To this day, we are unsure of the cause of death and have been unsuccessful in finding the resting place of William. After his passing, William's house was put in a trust fund for his son Thomas, who was only 14 at the time of his dad's passing and therefore could not inherit the house at that moment. Thomas, his sister Susan, and their mother Rose lived a relatively quiet life until 1662 when Rose Cullender was suddenly arrested for suspicion of witchcraft. Rose was stripped naked and searched for marks commonly believed to be associated with witches. We can only assume they found what they were looking for, as she was tried and executed in Bury St Edmunds in March of 1662. Several months passed and Thomas decided to pass ownership of their Swan Lane home over to his sister Susan. Susan had no children and had never married, meaning that when she died in 1688, the house was to be passed on to her now deceased brother's only surviving child, Bethia Fox. Bethia immediately sold the house upon gaining ownership, bringing the story of the Cullender family to a close. Their once family home was demolished in the 1960s after a redevelopment of the area. Amy Denny is the second and wildly less talked about of the witches from Lowestoft, this being because we know far less about her life than that of Rose Cullender. One of the few facts we do know is that her husband was named John, and both of them possibly originated from Beccles, as unlike Lowestoft, Beccles actually have documentation of their existence. Whereas Rose Cullender showed little to no signs of what they believed to be witchcraft, Amy Denny was unfortunately related to a known witch at the time, Margaret Eccleston, from the village of Linstead, which was located about 9 miles south of Beccles. Not much information regarding accusations made towards Amy Denny exists, and neither do details of her trial. Due to the fact she was hanged on the 17th of March 1662 in Bury St Edmunds, we can assume that her relation to a previously convicted witch was enough to get her proven guilty of witchcraft. Amy Denny's house was situated on the south end of Lowestoft and was demolished in the 18th century after a gun battery was erected nearby. I would also like to mention that a book was published in 1682 named A Trial of Witches that detailed the events of these witch trials. A recent auction saw a first edition copy of this book sell for £5,400. In conclusion, although it's unlikely that Rose Cullender or Amy Denny ever actually participated in any kind of pagan activities, we know their pain and suffering was genuine, and they almost definitely suffered the same unfair trials that most of these alleged witches had forced upon them. If you are not a believer of the possibility of magic and other clairvoyant activities, then this is a clear case of thousands of people being murdered with no real evidence supported against them, destroying families and their homes. Rest in peace, Rose Cullender and Amy Denny. A Victorian era bottle dump. I'm not entirely sure how many locals even know about the existence of this, but on a field situated next to Gunton Woods is a Victorian era bottle and pottery dump, or possibly even just a straight landfill. It is filled to the brim with fragments of bottles, ceramic and terracotta sherds, and coloured Victorian era glass. Finds that I have found on the surface alone date back to the 1840s and 1850s. Some of the most interesting things I have found on top of this location are these incomplete torpedo bottles dating to the late 19th century, many of which are products of Lowestoft and contain great local history. This begs the question, if such awesome finds as torpedo bottles can be found partially exposed from the ground, what variety of complete bottles and pottery lies beneath this area much further down? In my opinion, this location should be professionally excavated in order to preserve these rare locally produced bottles, as not many examples of them exist, let alone in good condition. I want to talk to you briefly about Lowestoft porcelain. It was a Lowestoft-based factory famous for its porcelain wares. It was active from 1757 to 1802. The high-quality goods created by Lowestoft porcelain are now extremely sought after and can fetch very high prices. A large collection of this porcelain is on display at the museum situated in Nicholas Everett's Park in Elton Broad. The reason I am bringing this up is because the surface finds from our bottle dump have dated back as far as 1840, meaning only another 40 years back, and we reach the possibility of this dump yielding Lowestoft porcelain sherds or even complete products. If the pottery and bottles in the soil continue to get older the deeper you go, then there is a real chance of this dump coexisting with the manufacturing dates of Lowestoft porcelain. I would suggest visiting this location if you are a keen pottery sherd or bottle collector. Please note, this is a popular area for camping, and groups of kids often hang around this area. I would certainly not advise digging up this location however, as it is privately owned land. So unless you can acquire permission from the landowner, you will sadly have to stick to surface finds in this location. But that's okay, because there is plenty to go around. The underground crypts of St Margaret's Church. St Margaret's is an absolutely stunning church, one of the most beautiful I have ever seen. It was built during the 14th and 15th centuries and holds many secrets of its own. By far, the most fascinating thing about this church is the crypt beneath its grounds, dating to the 14th century. It is very similar to a crypt known to be located along the town's high street, these crypts being noted as the only two of their kind in Lowestoft. Related to this, a story tells the tale of Oliver Cromwell passing through Lowestoft, and during his stay he supposedly created multiple extremely lengthy secretive tunnels. This is notable not only because of Cromwell famously hiding treasure everywhere, but also gives backbone to a theory that claims a secret tunnel ran from the crypt beneath St Margaret's to the crypt situated in the high street. Now, it should be noted that there is literally no evidence or findings to support the theory that any tunnels run underneath Lowestoft, but the possibility that should they exist, they were created by Oliver Cromwell himself is fascinating enough to warrant being mentioned. Besides, the crypts are known to exist, so why not a tunnel that connects the two? I'm one of the firm believers in the possibility of this, and decided it would be a good idea to try and gather some footage of my own. Right, so obviously I originally intended for this video that we would ask someone at the church if we could have a look at the crypts. For full transparency, I did speak to a caretaker here months ago, and he said that if I came, this was obviously pre-COVID, and he said that if I came just after a service or just before a service, they'd gladly show me the crypts. But as you can see, due to COVID, well, you probably can't see, but they're not open for worship this Sunday, which really sucks. But it's also good, I guess. Yeah, we'll investigate this further in the future, post-COVID, I think. The Lowestoft Schools and the High Street Underground Cottages. The Lowestoft Schools are located along the Old High Street. They are a series of lanes running from the town down to the former beach village that resided below. They were created over years and years of residents travelling down the sloping cliff and wearing it down. These slopes are now dedicated sets of stairs leading to Sparrow's Nest, as well as the more industrial portion of Lowestoft, located beside the sea. I don't really have much else to say regarding the schools. I just wanted to point out their significance to the town's rich beach culture. What is interesting, however, is along the same road as the schools, there are small underground cottages situated in a large amount of the stores. It is important to note, this is also the same rough location in which Rose Calendar of the Witch Trials first lived, as well as where one of the crypts with a possible secret tunnel is found. A lot of these underground cottages can be entered during Lowestoft Heritage Days and other various tours. It should also be mentioned that a lot of people entering these cottages often sense an eerie vibe, leading many locals to believe they are haunted. Whilst we are on the subject of hauntings in the Old High Street, an old pub that was formerly a hotel in the Victorian era is allegedly haunted by the ghost of a monk who took his own life. This pub, known as Bayfields, closed its door a few years back, meaning these paranormal claims cannot currently be investigated. It is a great shame to see Bayfields closed down. It clearly has a lot of history. It's even one of the few places in Lowestoft that's referred to in this book about places to eat in Suffolk from 1990. If you are interested in visiting any of the cottages or other locations throughout the High Street, including the Lowestoft Town Hall, then I strongly recommend you take part in the next Lowestoft Heritage Days. It is becoming harder to access and visit these locations, so I would take the opportunity whilst it's free viewing. In addition to this, there is also a dedicated Haunted Lowestoft tour. This tour will take you to multiple locations in the town that have had alleged connections to the paranormal, as well as sites believed to be haunted. I can personally say I have been on this tour, and it's certainly worth experiencing at least once. The historical significance of Corton Cliffs. I'm taking you back to the beach, a special secluded part of the beach located in Corton, another suburb of Lowestoft. The beach has no safe entrances and is now only publicly accessible via some large granite boulders that you can climb over, or you can risk taking the beach path during low tide. Just like Pakefield, Corton is rich with fossils and other historically significant artefacts, but I want to make it very clear that Corton Beach should not be accessed at this time, and if you are attempting to pursue fossil hunting and beach combing, I would recommend Pakefield Beach, based on it having a less hazardous entrance and landscape, as well as producing more consistent finds. This no longer safe to access portion of the beach is broken up into two segments. The first part you arrive at directly after crossing the granite boulders. It is a marvellous strip of the beach and is rich with boulders that have fallen from the top of the cliff, as well as this burnt car apparently. I hope no one was injured and this was placed here after the fact. The second part of the beach is where this adventure becomes truly dangerous, and I would advise that anyone, especially when venturing out alone, does not attempt to cross this cluster of debris separating the two beach segments. With that being said, once across the debris you come to an extremely small portion of the beach. It contains a peat layer that yields ancient wood and other vegetation. It is extremely dangerous to be in this location due to virtually no one visiting it and the severity of the current coastal erosion situation. Just whilst we're on the subject of coastal erosion, here is a comparison between 2008 and 2020. Coastal erosion has caused the cliffs of Corton to fall back several metres. Corton Cliffs yields vast amounts of ammonites and belemnites, which are sea creatures of the Jurassic era and are not uncommon to find. I have even found pieces of ammonites here, in my most recent search of the area following Hurricane Dennis. This area of the cliffs has also produced a large variety of Jurassic fossils, such as ichthyosaur vertebrae and reptile remains. In conclusion, Corton Beach is a very important part of Lowestoft, but it's becoming increasingly more dangerous to access, and one day, its secrets may be locked away forever. The North Deans Bunkers. The North Deans Beach of Lowestoft is home to several fascinating World War I and II bunkers, or pillboxes as people call them. Years of abuse from the public have rendered most of these bunkers inaccessible. I mean, would you look at how absolutely filthy the inside of most of these bunkers are? Without going into too much detail, these bunkers often contain not only vast amounts of rubbish, but also medical waste and other kinds of used products. A lot of the bunkers have also given me reason to believe they are often occupied by the homeless and have become a staple location for narcotics users. For these reasons, I would strongly recommend against entering these bunkers. Although I am not an expert, it is safe to assume these bunkers are strategically placed and would have offered great protection for our troops against a possible enemy invasion. There exist so many of these types of bunkers that I don't even know where they all are. I have been out and about exploring the local area before and have come across several of these completely by accident, some of which are in really good condition, and others are completely hidden and would go unnoticed by most passers-by, such as this one, hidden by vegetation located along the old railway of Lowestoft. Other bunkers have succumbed to nature and have faced its wrath. The most interesting of these coastal war relics, however, is actually situated in Pakefield. Sitting right at the edge of the cliff, it won't be long before this construction becomes embedded along the beach or disappears into the sea forever. Just like the others, I strongly advise against actually entering these bunkers. They are in a remote and not very trafficked area and are just incredibly eerie and disturbing in general. My favourite of all of these coastal bunkers is actually in Corton. It is located at the edge of Corton Cliffs and is not often visited. It has a great view and makes for an awesome place to forget about the world around you and is truly peaceful. From fossils found in our cliffs to witches on trial and even a Cromwell tunnel conspiracy, I hope you enjoyed our journey through the ages of Lowestoft and have learned a lot about this town's culture, legends surrounding its people and the beautiful locations it has to offer. Whilst I certainly have not covered everything interesting in this town, I feel satisfied in that I have shown a wide variety of historical locations and shared some great local history with you guys. I hope that many of the locals will venture out in search of these locations themselves and come to understand how wonderful of a town Lowestoft truly is. Thank you all so much for watching, and until the next one, sayonara.